And hello and welcome. My name is Martin, and today what we're going to be doing is creating what's called a visibility layer inside of the mask that we created in the previous tutorials. And what this is going to allow us to do is to be able to actually cut a hole through the landscape itself to either create a hole in the ground that our character could fall down, or maybe like a hole in the side of something, like to create a mountain pass or something like that. So let's go ahead and get started. We obviously need to go back to where our material is, so we're going to go to content. We're going to go to a_my_stuff, which is the folder we created, and then we're going to go into where we have the landscape tool itself. So let me double click in there, and here's the landscape tool. So what I want to do is double click on it, open it, so then that way I can see the blueprint that we created for it the other day. Now what we want to do is we want to select the material itself. So you want to have not any of the other boxes selected, but the one that actually has the name of the material in it. And from there we're going to scroll over to we're going to go over to the left hand side, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to see that right now this thing is left as a blend mode. Right now it's set to opaque, which means that it doesn't allow light to travel through it. So if we click on there, we can see that one of the options that we have is masked. So we're going to click on masked, and remember that I said that some of these things over here we weren't able to get to them because it was not allowed, or we did not have some kind of option over here turned on. And if we look over here now, we have what is called the opacity mask, and that is now available to us. So that's actually what we're going to use to create the ability to cut through the material. So right here what we want to do is come over into the blueprint area somewhere free and type in visibility mask, and the only one that we should get is what's called a landscape visibility mask. So if we select that, we get that piece of code, that bubble, and we're going to attach that to the opacity mask. And this is going to allow us to be able to add or remove, make visible or not visible points or vertices within the landscape itself. And so the effect of this will be like we're cutting a hole through it. So once we've done this, what we want to do is hit apply and save. And save. Okay, so that now becomes part of the material. And at this point we could close this down. We probably do have to wait for those shaders to finish. So everything is going to have to be recolored. Okay, so at this point, all the shaders have finished, and we are able to now use the visibility layer in the landscape. So what I want to do is I want to create a situation where there is a tunnel system, maybe that is attached somewhere to this house or just off to the house, that our character might be able to use to escape or to go to another level, sort of. And I guess it's sort of like Super Mario Brothers, where you create like a well or a pipe or something, and your character can jump through that. But in this case, we actually need to create that, and I need to create a hole through the landscape so that the character could actually do that if you so chose to make them do that. So what we're going to do in this for the remainder of this video is I'm going to show you how to cut into the landscape, and in part one we will make a small tunnel that the character could use to escape. And then we will, in the second tunnel, create a cave entrance, and inside of that cave entrance, again, do the same thing, make it look like a cave, right? So let's go ahead and get started. So what we will need to do is to go to modes, we will need to go to landscape, and we will need to go to sculpt. Now, remember that we did say we were going to come back to visibility, and here we are. Now that we do have a visibility layer, we are able to actually go ahead and cut a hole in this. So just with what brush size we have right now, let me go ahead and I've clicked once. We're waiting for the mask to build. And once the mask is built, we should have a clear hole in the ground. Okay. So we can see now that we are underneath the area. Remember that a landscape only has visibility on one side, so it only has the material on one side. And just to go ahead and prove that there is truly a hole here, what I'm going to do is add a geometry. So I'm going to jump out of this and go back to the select tool. Go back to geometry, grab a box, put it onto the landscape. In this case, this is just to check something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch it, and then we'll move it. Okay. So we're going to use that just so that we have a system of measurement and we can see where and what's actually happening with that, right? So there is truly a hole there. And if I push play and walk my character over in that direction, we can see the geometry that we created. We can see the hole, and if we fall into the hole, at some point we'll hit the level where we stop. Oh, so there is no die on this. You'll just have to hit escape or you'll fall indefinitely. Fine. Okay. So we do indeed have a hole. So how do we dress this up to make it look more like a small tunnel or something that we can use? What we'll do is go back to modes. We'll go back to landscape. We'll go back to paint. We'll go back to, sculpt, visibility. And just like if for those who are thinking, if you hold shift while you do this, you're actually going to add that information back in, right? So all we do is left click when we have the visibility tool, that will remove. And if we hold shift and click, we can add that area back. So if we make a hole that's too big, or we don't like the way or the location that it's at, we can always go back and replace it. So what I want to do is I actually want to make the brush fall off 0 so that I actually have a straight circle. A straight circle, that's really weird. A circle that the edge doesn't fade. It's going to make a perfect circle when I cut. It's going to try to, all the vertices there are going to be taken equally. And then from there, I'm going to also make this a much smaller size. That looks like a size small enough for my character to fall through. So I'm going to click, and we now do indeed have a hole through our landscape. And if we wanted to, we could even tidy that up a little bit more. That's too small. Okay, so that's 150. Let's make this 25. See how. All right, so now we have a really nice sort of like little squarish, cornered up deal. This is perfect because now what we'll do is we will set up the tunnel system. So to do this, we'll have to go back to place actors, grab a geometry. I'm going to jump out of landscape and go back to select in modes. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to grab a box. We'll put the box out there. We'll set up the size of the box. So we'll go to brush and let's see, let's make that, I don't know. Obviously it needs to be big enough to cover, and I want it to overlap a little bit so then that way we can create a border for this. So at 500, that's kind of, let's do 600. We'll kind of center that a little bit better. Okay. And then going in the other direction, we'll make this, say, I'd assume it'd have to be about the same, so maybe 600. Okay. Stick that into the ground. And with this, obviously we're coming in with that landscape material because that's what I have selected. Let me go back to content and select brick. We will filter for just materials. And let's go ahead and grab a brick and throw that on there. And now that we have that selected, let's go and grab, because it is still a geometry, I have it closed? Am I just not seeing it? Oh, okay. It's just because I didn't have one of the sides selected. Okay, now that I have the side selected, of course, I can go in here and I can say select all underneath geometry. So select matching adjacent surfaces, grab that once, drop it in there. We still have all the surfaces selected. So if I go here and select, let's say it's 1 by 1 now, let's make it 2 by 2. Hit apply, and I can go through and I can align all the different surfaces that I want. But at this point, what I want to do is I want to create another box. So with it still selected in the world outliner, we're going to right click and we are going to go to edit, duplicate. So now we have 2. We'll make this box, let's say 100 units smaller. So we'll go 500. Tab 500, and I do need to make the box thicker so then that way it does stick up out of this, so then that way we can use this as a subtractive. This is going to be the hole that we're creating. So let's make this 300, and we are actually going to wait before we cut the hole in this. And actually, you know what, I'm going to make this nope, you know what? We're gonna go ahead and cut the hole now. With it still selected and it protruding through obviously both edges of that, so then that way when we make it a subtractive, it goes all the way through. We're gonna go ahead and go back to brush and make this a subtractive. Okay. So we're seeing a little bit of the edge of the environment there. If we want to, we can probably make this box a little bit smaller. So 400 by 400. And all we did was make that smaller, so then that way this box is inside the area that we cut out, right? So if I make this side not visible, we'll see that that box does indeed sit in there like that, and that's why we're not seeing the edge anymore. So let's go back and make that visible again. All right, so now we have the beginning of the tunnel. If you wanted to match the bricks up at this point, I could, you can go ahead and do that. Let me just go ahead and make them the same size so it doesn't look weird. Okay, and then we could go back and fix each one of the individual edges. All right, so now what I need to do is create the tunnel. So a lot of that is going to happen underneath. And what we're going to want to do is at this point, instead of using, I mean, you could have a square tunnel. There's absolutely nothing wrong with there being a square tunnel. We just haven't used the cylinder tool a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and use that here, since tunnels usually, have some type of a roundness to them or something like that. We're going to flip this thing on its side. Oh, and you know what? I should probably let me move this back to where this is doing 10. And then that way when I pull, I can get it to 90 degrees easily. In the details panel, I'd probably make this, remember that your character is a certain height. So we obviously need this tunnel to be tall enough for the character to be able to walk in. The other thing we also want to do is go ahead and make this a hollow shape. So then that way it is indeed a tunnel. So that's what made it look like that. And let's see. So our character is about 200. So let's make the... You're going to create the inner and outer radius this way. So let's make the outer radius, let's say 250. Just tall enough for the character to be able to walk through. And then we'll make the outer radius 225. Ooh, too much. Okay. So now we have an area. And if you wanted to check this, what I would do is I would just set this down. Oops. Let's undo that. Let's hit end. And I'm going to bring my character around and see if I can actually walk through this before I start building a whole thing with it. Looks possible. Yeah, I think we'll be fine. We have plenty of space. We could even maybe possibly make that a little bit smaller. Okay, so we'll grab that guy again and go back to the brush. You know what? Let's keep it 200 by 200. Okay, so once we've got that, we need to create the length of it, so then that way it feels longer. Believe that's going to come from our z-axis, so let's go ahead and pull that out. So now we have a tunnel. Let's make this, I don't know, 2000. And then what we want to do is we want to place it underneath. Obviously, it's going to need to be underground. Okay, let me line that up a little bit better. Now, obviously, the hole that we have up here in the top is larger than the tunnel itself. So at that point, you can do two things. You could make maybe the tunnel a little bit wider, right? Depending on what you were going for, whether it was a big sewer system or a small sewer system or whatever. So you could do that here, or we can make the small box or the sub box, subtractive box that's here, smaller, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to select the inside edge of that, and let's bring that down to, let's say 200. And let's bring the other one down to about 200. Oops, moving around too fast. Slow the camera down a bit. Okay, so now we have more or less. Let's move that back, and let's get this just centered over that. Oops. Okay. And if I grab my character, if I push play and I jump, I need to check to make sure that I can still fit in there. And that my character is not going to not be able to fall into. Okay. So yeah, definitely my character has enough room to be able to fall into that. And so let's go ahead and cut the hole through the top. And the easiest way to do this is to go ahead and grab the one that you already have here. If you had the tunnel set up first and you created the cut would go through both objects. But in this case, we set up the cut first to figure out and to be able to show you how to do this. So what I'm going to have to do is create two of these boxes and push the second box down in. So I'm going to hit here. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit, duplicate. And you'll see now that that second box went ahead and cut all the way through. And if I need to, I can get rid of the first box. So I'm going to push that down just a little bit further so I can click the edge for the first box. And I should be able to delete that. And then if I go down, we'll see the edge to the new box, and all I got to do is pull that guy back up. There we go. So now we have a single box that goes all the way down instead of having to deal around or mess around with two subtractives. Okay, so that's how we create the tunnel. In a later tutorial, I actually have one that the idea here is, I mean, obviously you could have a tunnel that intersects another tunnel that intersects another tunnel, and you can have a true tunnel system that would go underground. I'm going to cut the tutorial here because for the most part this is set up. You know what, maybe the other thing that I might do is cut a bend in this so that you can create like a perpendicular cut into this. So let's do that real quick. Let's make a copy of this guy. Hit Control C, Control V, and then we should just be able to rotate that one off axis 90 degrees. Let's bring it into this direction. And so now we see that we have, and I probably push it back because what we're going to do is cut a hole through this. And I want to have enough of an edge that I can see, I can clearly go through it. Okay, so that's a good intersection as far as the two of them going into one another. Looks structurally okay. It's matching, goes up to the ceiling. There we go, something like that. Okay, so now all we got to do is put a subtractive in this. So we're going to grab another geometry, place it in. Of course, it came in with that. Let's put it into the wall. Okay, and here I'm going to go ahead and make it a subtractive, and then we'll sculpt it after we can see through it. Okay, and all we have to do now is just give it the right size. So we don't need it to be super out there like that, but we do need the width to be a little bit bigger. You can see that we're starting to cut through the outer edge, so that's not good. Let's put this back more in the center. Okay, so it needs to be smaller than this. Or it doesn't need to be quite as tall. Okay, we could probably drop it a little bit. That looks pretty cool. Maybe make it just a little bit wider. Okay, and the whole time all you're doing is making sure that you're not cutting into the top or the ceiling. And then you can dress the front of this. You know, if you find something that looks like a gate or a grate or something like that and you want to stick that there, you can always, you know, grab this guy and still move it back a little bit and see if we get, whoops, too much. Okay, there's the hole again. Okay. So, you know, and at that point you can make this tunnel longer, make it, you know, go this way instead of that way. So instead of it being so much to that, to where it was like right in the middle. I'm doing that the hard way. Let me see where I can see both of them. So here, instead of it being an opening, you could put like another geometry and block it off so that the player can't go any further that direction. Just make sure that the door is large enough that the player will actually be able to go through. So, you know, do a playthrough. So let me go ahead and see what this feels like. Okay, character does indeed fall all the way through. Okay, we might have to do a little bit of a better job creating a bigger hole for the character to go through, but that's what we would do with testing, right? So, yep, needs to be just a little bit bigger. And also we're seeing like a little cut in the hole in the floor right there. If you need to, I mean, this could be done with like 2 geometries, right? So we can see that we need to get a little bit of that back in, so then that way we're not cutting to where we can see through the floor as we come up. And then the other thing we might end up doing is just making a second geometry. Or let's see if we can make this one feel a little bit better. If we thin it up, that'd probably be better. And now we can come down a little bit. Oops, wrong one. Okay. Okay, so now we have definitely a size hole that we've custom made, wide enough to be able to go through both of those objects. So then that way we can get our character down in there and through to the other end. From there, we'll just test it one more time, make sure that we can actually go through, and we'll pick up in the next tutorial with making a cave entrance and creating something that looks like a cave. Okay, we might create like a little up ramp or something like that with another mesh or another geometry, and then you could have your player running around in some kind of underground setting. Okay, jump back. And then at this point we do have the situation, well, how do we get back up? I'll show you that in a later tutorial. Once we get into blueprints, I'll actually make it one of the chapter 11 or the lab 11 projects. Remember that there is a project that I have you pick out of a group of different projects, and one of those is how to make a ladder so that your character can move up an object and across. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video and you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.